Hello friends, welcome you all on this series of lectures on transmission line protections, and today we are starting with the first lecture on distance protection of transmission lines. In this lecture we will focus basically on the basic concepts of distance protection of transmission lines, like the operating principles of distance protection, followed by the various characteristics that are used or presently in use across the various utilities. Thirdly, we will cover about the zones of distance protection. Now, in this session, we will discuss about the various types of faults on the transmission lines. But remember, we are not going to discuss about the fault analysis techniques. If required, we will cover those fault analysis techniques in some separate lecture. Secondly, we will discuss about the limitations of overcurrent protections and why distance protection comes into picture, followed by the distance protection operating principles, then distance protection characteristics like Moe, quadrilateral, plane impedance, or the polygon characteristics and lenticular characteristics. And in the end, we will cover the zones of distance protection. Now, you all are aware that right from the generation to the utilization of electrical energy, the element which is exposed most to the environment is a transmission line. So definitely the chances of faults are always very high on transmission line as compared to any other elements in this power system. So now out of those faults on transmission lines, the major types of faults can be categorized either in transient faults or persistent or permanent faults. Transient faults are basically those faults which disappears after short-lived intervals, and they are caused mainly due to the lightning over voltages, which may lead to insulation flashover and then will lead to single line to ground faults. They may also be caused because of falling tree or forest growth or swinging lines. But remember, the swinging lines will generally lead to phase-to-phase fault as compared to this phase-to-ground faults. Second conditions comes the persistent or permanent faults, and one of the simplest example of a permanent fault is a broken conductor falling to ground. Now, before taking the line into service, these types of faults must be located and repaired, and then only you can take the line into service. That's why these are called persistent or permanent faults. Now, basically, the faults on the transmission line can be either of series type or shunt type. Series types of faults and shunt types of faults, in the simplest language, is a series faults, for example, a broken conductor in which there is one phase of conductor going from substation A to substation B, and this conductor breaks from some points and now it is hanging either in the air or after breaking from any points, if it touches to ground, then it will lead to open conductor plus phase to ground fault. Second type of fault, that shunt fault, includes a fault between one phase to ground or between two phases, adjacent phases, or from two phase and then it touching to ground, three phase or three phase to ground fault. Out of all these types of shunt faults, phase to ground faults are generally the transient faults and all other faults are persistent or permanent faults. There are another chance of fault or another types of faults in the transmission lines, and these faults are called these faults occurs due to the fault between adjacent parallel lines. Uh, as you are aware that nowadays most of the utilities are using multi-circuit towers, and in these multi-circuit towers, two or three lines are running on a single towers parallelly. Now, if one conductor of one line breaks and touches the other conductors of the second line on the same multi-circuit tower, then it will lead to fault between two adjacent parallel lines. This is one of the case. There are multiple other cases, and we will discuss each types of faults and how these various types of faults will affect the performance of distance relay, how the measuring loops are considered, or how the measuring loops are identified in various types of faults in subsequent lectures. Now, the main requirements of line protection, and for that matter, main requirement of any protection, are basically these following five things. First is speed, second sensitivity, third selectivity, then security and reliability. Now, reliability is a general concept which covers two things: dependability and security. What is the meaning of dependability and security is that first, dependability, our protection system must be dependable. Must be dependable means whenever we want our protection system to operate due to any abnormal conditions or due to any fault in the system, then the uh, protection system must operate correctly. And security means the protection system must not operate for an out of zone faults, or the protection system must not operate for an abnormal conditions. As you are aware that in a power system there are always some conditions which is called abnormal, but this is not a fault situation. So relay must distinguish itself between these abnormal conditions and the fault situations. Selectivity means the relay must isolate only those part of the power system which is faulty, and by doing this, suppose there is a fault between substation A to substation B, then the relay must isolate only that faulty section and all other system in the network must remain in service so that the widespread outages will be limited. Third thing is speed. Our protection system must be as fast as possible, because if the protection system is fast, that means the time of operation will be very less. And if the time of operation will be less, the fault will be isolated in a minimum possible time. And this will definitely help in the reliability of the system by improving the stability of power system stability. Because if the fault is cleared very quickly, or if the fault is cleared in the minimum possible time, then you know that due to the fault, what is happening is the current is increasing. Now, if you calculate this heat generated due to this fault, so that heat will be I square times resistance into time. So more the time delay for operation of the relay, the more will be the heat generation, and that means the more will be the thermal effects on the system. Or if the time is less, then this effect thermal stresses will be lower. But if you are looking at any of these requirements, that is speed, sensitivity, selectivity, security, or reliability individually, then it is not possible, because whenever we want to compromise or we want to achieve one thing, then we have to compromise with other. Otherwise, what will happen? The cost of the protection system will keep on increasing. That is the first thing. And second thing, the complexity of a protection system will also increase. So we have to compromise somewhere between these five factors, as well as the complexity and the economy of those protection system. Now, the various types of protection systems that are being used or that are in use presently in the industry are these numbers. If you look at here, 21, 85, 68, 79, and likewise all the way down to 25 are basically the ANSI codes. And what is does this mean is, if you look from here bus of left hand side to the bus of right hand side, there is a transmission line going between these two buses. Now the 52 designates your circuit breakers, followed by current transformer at the one end of the transmission line, and then CT and 52 of the right hand side designates the current transformer and the breakers of other ends of line. LPT is basically the line potential transformer, but nowadays CVT are used in all the utilities, and we will discuss shortly why CVT are used and why not PT. Similarly, BPT is for bus potential transformer of at the both ends of the transmission line. That means at substation A BPT and substation B BPT. Then these numbers 21, 85, 68, 79 are basically the ANSI codes. For example, 21 is for distance protection, 85 it is the carrier protection or carrier aided protections, 68 for power swing, 79 for auto reclosure, 67 is your directional earth fault or directional overcurrent. If it is followed by N, that means earth fault. If it is not followed by N, that means overcurrent. 51 is again overcurrent, and 51N is your earth fault. 50 STB is STUB protection. This is again overcurrent, and this is definite time. 51 is IDMT type characteristics. DR is for disturbance recorder. 59 over voltage. 27 is your under voltage, and 25 is check sync. Now we will start with the overcurrent protection in the transmission line, and we will discuss it very shortly. What are the limitations of overcurrent protection and why we move to impedance protection or distance protection system. As you can see in this picture, the overcurrent protection is the simplest type of protection. This is your CT, which is measuring the current or the fault current or the line current. It is fed to a 51, that is overcurrent protection, and 51 is time delayed overcurrent protection. Now, this 51 overcurrent protection relay has some output contacts, and one of these output contacts are wired to the tripping coils of circuit breakers, and this output contact is fed through a DC battery voltage of 220 volt or 110 volt depending upon the systems of various utilities. Now what happens in case, suppose there is a fault and this CT measures this fault current on the primary side, and IF dash is the current measured in the secondary side by the CT, and if this current is more than the settings of the relay 51, then this relay will operate. After operation of this relay, this contact will close, and once this contact will close, the DC voltage will be transferred from the battery to the tripping coil, and finally the tripping coil will energize the tripping mechanism of circuit breaker, and circuit breaker opens to isolate the fault. This is the basic concepts in the overcurrent protection, and this is very simplest way of understanding overcurrent protection. But what are the limitations of overcurrent protection? Basically, the major limitations of overcurrent protection comes into the complex grid during the coordination of the relays. For example, consider a very simple system having only two transmission lines, and suppose there is a fault at this location, which is known as IF1. There are two relays, R1 and R2, which is used for protection of R1 is used for the protection of this line section, R2 is used for the protection of this line section. Now, the overcurrent relay coordination can be done either on the basis of current or on the basis of time delays or on the basis of both current and time. Now, suppose we are using overcurrent protection on the basis of current only, and the protection system is instantaneous in nature, that is instantaneous overcurrent protection. Suppose the relay at R2 is set for a current set to operate at a current of 100 ampere, and relay at R1 is set to operate for a current at 150 amperes. But both relay will operate instantaneously because these are instantaneous overcurrent relay. Now what will happen if suppose there is a fault at this point, which is IF1, and if this fault current is more than suppose 200 ampere, then this 200 ampere is more than the setting of R2 relay and also the R1 relay. That means both the relay at location R2 and relay at location R1 will operate, and it will lead to widespread outages. That means the first limitation of overcurrent protection, that is instantaneous overcurrent protection, is that it cannot provide the backup. Second alternative method might be you may use the same current for R2 and R1 but with some time delay. Suppose at location R2 the relay will operate at say time 50 millisecond, and at relay R1 suppose we are using a coordination time interval of 200 or 250. We will discuss later on what is coordination time. That means if relay R2 operates at 50 millisecond, we are saying that relay R1 will operate at 300 after 300 millisecond. Now for the same situation, suppose this fault current is more than this setting of R2 and R1 both, then firstly R2 will operate, and if R2 fails to operate, then only R1 will operate. Up to this point, you may think that, oh, this is solving our problem. This is providing backup. But no, there is again one issue. The issue is that in these types of time delayed overcurrent protection, what we are using is we are setting the time of operation of relay R2, then we increase the time of operation of R1 by some coordination time of suppose 100 or 200 millisecond. Then the next relay will have the operation time of operation of R1 plus some coordination time. Like this, we will keep on increasing the time of operation of relay, all upstream relays. Now, what will happen? Suppose in this simple case, relay R2 has the time of operation of 50 millisecond and relay R1 has the time of operation of 200 millisecond. And if this is the source side, so whenever there is a fault at this point, the fault current will be higher for this relay or for this section. But we are delaying this relay to operate for 200 millisecond. That means for a fault which has higher magnitude, relay will operate at larger time intervals or at larger times. That means the fault which is closer to source will be cleared in more time as compared to the faults away from the source. So this is again causing a problem. So the third condition comes if you use the ID-empty type characteristics, and this ID-empty type characteristic is in simple terms inverse definite minimum time characteristic. And in this inverse definite minimum time, what we do generally is that we set the relay operating time in such a way that the higher the fault current, lower will be the time of operation of the relay. So we will select two characteristics in this case for relay R2 and R1, one for each. And now the characteristics of R2 relay will be, if it is the characteristic of R2 relay, then the characteristic of R1 relay will be lower to this R2, and this gap between these two characteristics is basically the coordination time interval. Now if suppose there is a fault at any point, this like IF1, this is the fault. Now for this fault, the time of operation for relay R2 will be this time, and time of operation for relay R1 will be some time of operation for relay R1 for the same fault. Suppose this is the fault, IS1 is showing the fault. So the time of operation of relay R1 is this magnitude, and time of operation of relay R2 is this magnitude. That means this now the fault which is closer to source will be cleared earlier than compared to the fault which is further away from the source. But here comes again one limitations, that in these conditions or in this type of coordination, we have to have the data of fault levels or maximum fault level, and we coordinate the relay based on the data of maximum fault levels. Now, another limitation is that up to this point we are seeing only two relays or two transmission lines, but in actual conditions the power system are very complex network. Now if you consider the case of Indian power grid, and if you look at this picture, this is very congested grid consisting of lots of lines right from the 132 kV voltage level up to the 1200 kV voltage level. Now if you want to coordinate this relay at one location with the relay at another location, then this coordination will be very difficult. And secondly, the other limitations of overcurrent is that if the fault current and load currents are comparable, then we cannot set the overcurrent relay correctly. Now we will see how it is not possible to coordinate the overcurrent relay in a complex grid system. What are the limitations? The first thing here you can see is that we are considering a very simple system consisting of two sources or two generators having impedance, for example, of 10 ohm each, followed by a transmission line which impedance is 4 ohm, and then a second transmission line. Now suppose there is a fault on this transmission line, and this fault is at location F1. Now for this fault, the total current measured by this CT at this location will be your voltage. This is 400 kV by root 3 divided by the impedance up to this point. Now what is the impedance up to this point is these two 10 ohms which are in parallels, that means 10 and 10 in parallel leads to 5, and then 4 ohm of this transmission line. So this is 400 divided by root 3 into 5 plus 4. This is 5 and this is 4, and this current comes out to be something like 25.6 kiloamperes. Since this fault is outside this zone or outside this transmission line zone, that means the relay 50 which is installed at this location must not operate for any current which is lower than 25.6 kiloampere. That means the settings of the relay 50 for this particular case must be more than 25 kiloampere. Now consider case 2 in which one of the generator is now out of service and the fault is inside the transmission zones or inside this transmission line. But one of the generator is not out of service, maybe in shutdown, or generator is not present. Suppose only one generator is there. Then what happens? In this case, the fault current will be 400 divided by root 3 and impedance up to this point, and this impedance is 10. So this will be now be 23.09 kiloampere. That means for a fault F2, the relay must operate, and for this relay to operate, the setting must be lower than 23 kiloampere. Now this is very interesting situation. You have to set this relay to, for a value of 23 kiloampere, less than 23 kiloampere to operate, but at the same time that magnitude must be more than 25.6 kiloampere. And this is very impractical because we cannot set a value which is less than 23 but more than 26. That is the major limitations of overcurrent protection, because this overcurrent protection depends upon the source impedance. So the moment the source impedance changes, the fault current calculation will change, and the moment the fault current magnitude will change, the time of operation or the settings of the relay will change. So this is the one of the limitations of overcurrent protection. And now you know that because the grid are getting more and more complex, and because of this complexity in the grid, this network configuration and redistribution will keep on happening every time. So we cannot set our relay accurately, or the coordination becomes very difficult in overcurrent protection. So the next thing, now here comes the need of distance protection. Basically, the coordination of overcurrent and directional overcurrent relay is achieved using time delay, and which is not feasible and causes lots of difficulties in a complex grid. Second, as we have already studied just now, the time delay would become exceptionally long when applied to large power system. Not possible to protect complex system using overcurrent and directional overcurrent relays. To overcome all these problems, distance protections are used and distance protections are introduced. Distance protection is very popular for protecting transmission lines. It has a very fast operating time of one cycle. That means for a 50 Hz system, the operating time will be as low as 20 milliseconds. It can work independently or in coordination with other relay in the system. It is easy to design, and it has the best solution for wide range of system configuration. It can give 100% instantaneous protection with the help of communication aided scheme, and we will discuss about this communication aided schemes in later lectures. So now we will start with the operating principle of transmission lines, distance protection. From here, our main session starts, and we will now focus on the distance protection of transmission line, how distance protection system operates, what are the basic concepts involved, what is the effect of fault resistance, what basically is fault resistance. Then we will discuss about the various characteristics, followed by the zones of distance protection. Now consider a very simple system, and this is a single phase system consisting of one generator having voltage Vs and impedance of the source is Zs. Now at this relaying point, this is a relaying point. If the current measured at this relaying point is IR and voltage measured at this relaying point is VR, now this VR and IR are fed to the relay. Then this impedance ZL, it indicates the impedance of the transmission line, and Z load is the load or the impedance of the load. Now if you calculate the total impedance measured by the relay at this relaying point, this will be the voltage measured, that is VR, divided by the current measured by the relay, that is IR. So VR divided by IR, and if you apply the simple network theory concept, you can see that what is the VR? VR is simply IR times ZL plus Z load. That means VR divided by IR is ZL plus Z load. So if you are using any relay or distance protection relay at this point, and if you fed this relay with the measured voltage and measured current, then with the ratio of those two values, voltage and current, it can calculate the impedance up to this endpoints. Now, when a fault occurs, suppose a fault occurs at somewhere in this line, and after the fault, the impedance up to the fault location is MZL, and the remaining impedance of the line is 1 minus M times ZL, that because the total impedance is ZL. Suppose this fault doesn't involve any resistance and the fault resistance is 0. Now, again the impedance measured by the relay at this location will be the measured voltage, which is VR, divided by the measured current, which is IR. Now, this IR current, if you know, if you can see from this picture, this IR current is basically the sum of fault current and the load current, that is IF plus IL. And this VR is basically IR times MZL. If you are neglecting this fault resistance, that means the impedance measured by the relay will be IF times MZL divided by IF plus IL. And if we neglect this load current, because the fault current is always much higher as compared to load current, then we will get VR divided by IF, and which is equals to M times ZL. That means the impedance measured by this relay will be the actual impedance up to this fault point. You can see from this that the impedance measured by the relay up to the fault point is independent of this source impedance, which was one of the problems in the overcurrent relay. Now, if you can plot this impedance on a Rx plane, you know that the total impedance Z have two components, real components, that is resistance, and an imaginary component, that is reactance. And if you draw any point in this 2D plane, then it will be at suppose at this point, and this is the magnitude of R plus X, and at an angle which is tan inverse X by R. So this impedance will be a straight line having some angle in the 2D plane or in this Rx plane. Now, this impedance, total impedance Z, is the impedance of the transmission line. The relay measures the impedance up to the fault point. That means the relay measured the impedance up to the fault point, and this is the impedance measured by the relay, which is called MZL. Now, this side, if you see here, this side basically represents the load, because when the system is running, and in that conditions, if you know, when the system is running and the total current in that in the system is much lower than the fault current, that means the impedance during those times, the impedance measured by the relay will be very high, and that impedance may lie somewhere outside or somewhere far away from this impedance measured by the relay during the fault time. Now, up to this point, we have in this analysis, we have neglected the fault resistance. We are not considering any fault resistance. We are saying that the fault resistance is 0. But in actual condition, there are always some fault resistance involved, and this fault resistance can be due to the arc between the faulted conductors. For example, if it is a face-to-face fault, there will be an arc developed between the faulted conductor. Secondly, the ground fault resistance consists the arc resistance between conductor and tower plus tower and tower putting resistance and the ground return path resistance. Secondly, these fault resistance are dependent on time. So the fault resistance keep on changing with time. This is not a constant value, but for relaying purpose, we are assuming or we generally assume for relaying purpose that the fault resistance remains constant for a shorter period of time in these initial first or two cycles. Then the fault resistance have a particularly large value in case of tree contacts and the conductor lying on the ground. Now, this is an empirical formula to estimate the fault resistance. Basically, for a multi-phase fault, the fault consists only of the arc resistance, but for a earth fault, as you already know, the fault resistance consists of the arc and tower putting resistance. Now, this arc resistance, this is the empirical formula. It is given by something 28707 times L divided by I to the power 1.4, and this is the actual fault current I. Now, you know that if the fault is away from your substation, for example, if fault is at the remote end of the line, then the fault current will be of lower magnitude for the relay at your substation. So, lower the magnitude of the current, higher will be the magnitude of the arc resistance. So, the effect of arc resistance is higher in case of fault which is away from our substation, or in case of remote end faults, the arc resistance magnitude will be higher as compared to the fault which is closer to the substation. Now we will study what are the effects of fault resistance on distance protection. Remember, in this basic concept lecture, this is basically a simplest lecture. We are not focusing here on the effects of pre-fault and post-fault power on the distance protection schemes or distance protection principle. Definitely we will cover those things, that is the effect of pre-fault power flow, what are the effects of the power export and power import, as well as the what happens when the fault involves higher fault resistance with higher power export, and what happens when the fault arc resistance is low but the power export or power import is higher. So those kind of effects along with the effects of in-field we will consider in subsequent lectures, because this is only the basic lecture for the build-up purpose. Now, up to this point, you already know how we have calculated this impedance. In this section, we are simply doing that. Now we are considering the fault resistance. So previously we have ignored the effect of RF. Now we are considering RF. So the impedance measured by the protective relay by the simple logic now will be M times ZL plus RF. So if you remember from the last 2 or 3 slides that the impedance relay or the distance relay measures the impedance up to this point if the fault resistance is not present. Now, in the presence of fault resistance, your impedance point or the relay measured impedance now moves to some other location. This is the second location in the presence of fault resistance. Now, this is one of the basic characteristics. This is offset or simply plain Moore type relay or plain impedance type relay, and we will discuss this plain Moore type relay in characteristic in subsequent slides. But for the time being, consider that we are using a relay, the setting of which is drawn in such a way that you have drawn a circle passing through origin, and the diameter of this circle is equal to the total line impedance from substation A to substation B. Now, in case there is any fault, the impedance measured by the transmission line relay at this relaying point will fall on this line angle or this line impedance value. So anywhere if there is a fault and the resistance value is neglected, RF is neglected, then the impedance measured will be on this line. But the moment this RF is introduced, the impedance measured will change its location from this line to some other point. Now, this in one of the conditions it might happen. Suppose this line is very short. So if the line is short, that means your this circle or your this reach will be shorter. And now if you include this fault resistance, then it might happen that the impedance measured by the relay falls outside this characteristic, and that means the relay might not operate correctly in the presence of fault resistance. So whenever the fault resistance are introduced or whenever the fault resistance are considered in the distance relay operating principle, then the operation of distance relay hampers. So to mitigate this effect, what we can do, instead of using this characteristic, which is more characteristic, we can use a quadrilateral characteristic having a higher magnitude of resistive fault coverage. Basically, why we cannot increase the resistive coverage of more relays, because if you see this is a circular characteristic, and if you know this circle, basically in a circle, this equation is simply r square plus x square is equals to radius square, or in general terms x square plus y square is equals to k square, which k is the radius of the circle. So if you modify any of these parameters x or h, then the radius of the circle will keep on changing. That means if you change the resistive reach of this small circle, you cannot change it without changing the reactive reach of the more characteristic. That means we cannot include higher value of RF in this more characteristics simply by extending RF, or simply by extending the RF reach. The more characteristic will change from its basic characteristic to some other characteristic, because this x magnitude will also change if you change the r and you want to keep this circle constant. That is not possible. But if you are using a rectangular characteristic, then if you see from here, this reactive reach you can keep constant, and you can directly keep on increasing the resistive reach as per your requirement. So the reactive reach is fixed, but resistive reach we can increase as per our requirement. And this type of characteristic is called quadrilateral characteristic. And in the subsequent slides, we will see what are the meaning of these angles. This angle in the right hand side and some angle on the left hand side also we will see in the subsequent slides. Now, basically, a distance protection characteristics, we have the following types of characteristics which are in use. This is impedance characteristic, Moore characteristics, offset Moore, lenticular, quadrilateral, cross polarized, and polygon characteristics. Impedance characteristic is the simplest types of characteristics which are in use. And in the impedance characteristic, basically, what is done is that a circle is drawn with a radius equal to the impedance of the transmission line. And now if a fault is anywhere inside this circle, then the relay will operate. And if you see this relay, the one major disadvantage is that this relay is non-directional. So this cannot distinguish whether the fault is behind this bus bar or fault is in the forward direction, because it will operate for any fault either in the forward direction or in the reverse direction. So that is one of the limitations of the impedance relay. Simply if we offset this circle, and if you draw this circle starting from the origin with the same radius like in the previous case, which is the half of line impedance, that means the diameter is equals to total line impedance. If we draw the circle now passing through origin, we will get the Moore characteristic. And now if you see, the major advantage of this Moore characteristic is that this relay is inherently directional. So it will operate only in case the fault is in the forward direction. It will not operate for any fault in the reverse direction. But one of the limitation of this Moore characteristic is that if the fault is closer to this origin, and what this means, the fault closer to origin is a fault which is closer to your substation. So any closing faults, the relay will not be able to distinguish correctly that if it is in the forward direction or it is in the reverse direction. And it might happen that a fault which is a closing fault in forward direction, but the relay detects or relay measures this fault in the reverse direction and it might not operate. So that is one of the limitations of the Moog characteristics. That's why this Moog characteristic is extended somewhat in the negative direction, and this is for the coverage of reverse direction fault or reverse fault. Now if there is any fault closer to origin, this relay will detect whether it is in the forward direction or reverse direction and it will take a decision accordingly. But before discussing now the lenticular and polygon characteristics, we will discuss quadrilateral. And like I have already explained in the previous slides, that the quadrilateral characteristic is basically used for a better resistive reach coverage. Because if you see in all these three characteristics, impedance, mode, and offset, these are the circular characteristics, and in this circle, we cannot modify the resistive reach without modifying the reactive reach. So this all these characteristics are having a very shorter resistive reach coverage as compared to quadrilateral characteristic, in which we can have higher resistive reach coverage. Now, the second thing that is important to note here is that if you are using a quadrilateral characteristic with higher resistive reach, then what happens now? This is your load region, and I have already explained earlier, this is your load region. Now in case suppose the load on the transmission line keeps on increasing, so what happens, the current keeps on increasing, voltage, either if the voltage is fixed, so current is increasing and the voltage magnitude is suppose not deviating much, but due to increase in current, the impedance measured by the relay will keep on decreasing, and this impedance measured by the relay keeps on decreasing, and it might happen that this load resistance or this load characteristics might enter inside this relay characteristics for some higher magnitude of load current. So in this quadrilateral characteristic, due to the increase of resistive reach, there are chances that in case of higher loading of transmission lines, this load characteristic might enter inside this quadrilateral characteristic and the relay might trip on the higher loads. This is again not desirable feature. So to avoid this, what we can do, we can cut out a portion of this quadrilateral characteristic, and that cut out portion will be equivalent to the maximum load current or maximum load that can flow on that transmission line. And that characteristic, when it is drawn by removing that load uh, characteristic from this quadrilateral characteristic, then it becomes the polygon characteristics. If you see here, there are in the quadrilateral characteristic, the topmost line is exactly parallel to the resistive reach. But in this polygon characteristic, this topmost line is inclined at some angle. Anyway, we will discuss it in the subsequent lectures when we will discuss the effect of in-feed and the effect of pre-fault and post-fault power flow. But remember one thing, you are already aware that in an AC system, the transmission of power from one end to other end depends upon the angular difference of voltages at two ends. So if a power is to transfer from substation A to substation B, then there must be some angle difference between these two voltages. Now, depending upon this angle difference, the power can be either import or export. Now, if there is any angle difference between these voltages, that means the current from bus A to bus B, this current IA and IB, if you are considering the current, suppose in this figure, up to this point, we are considering only the source at one end, but suppose we have the source at this end also, and the power is flowing from substation N to substation N, then in actual condition, what will happen that for the power to flow from substation M to substation N, the voltage angle at M must lead the voltage at angle at bus N. That means the current at bus M is leading the current at bus N, and this angle difference of current or angle difference in the current prior to fault has more and more effects in the performance of distance protection, and this effect keeps on increasing with the inclusion of fault resistance. We will discuss this in details in the subsequent lectures, but remember one thing: if you see at this point here, uh, this fault current, if you are considering this current from this end also, this fault current will be basically the current Im plus In. And now if you calculate this impedance at this point, that impedance will be some impedance up to this point plus the fault resistance times the ratio of this current In by Im, and this ratio will depends whether the pre-fault power is in the export or import. Depending upon that pre-fault power, your ratio will change, and that ratio, now that ratio is not in the resistance format only, it will include resistance and reactance, and that affects the total measured impedance of the relay. And that's why these characteristics, this can be either in the lower direction or this can be either in the upper direction. That we will discuss in the subsequent lecture, because this is our basic session only, so we are limiting only to the basic characteristics. Then the lenticular, if you see the lenticular is exactly the same as the offset mode characteristic. Only thing is that it is compressed from both sides. And why it is compressed? It is compressed so that if you see here, the total resistive reach of the offset mode characteristic is much more than the characteristic of lenticular type relays. So if the resistive reach coverage is higher, as you already know, then it might happen that due to the loading on the transmission line, that load characteristics might comes inside this relay, and the relay might operate incorrectly for higher loading. So to avoid that situation, this offset mode characteristic is compressed from both ends, and how it is done we will see in the subsequent lectures. And this comes to a lenticular characteristics having same reactive reach as that of offset mode in both forward and reverse direction, but lower resistive coverage. Cross polarized mode relay, it is uh, simple. In simple word, the polarization simply means if you are measuring the impedance of suppose R phase to ground fault, and in the simplest of terms, suppose this impedance measured is VR divided by IR, then it might happen that if you are measuring this voltage signal, if you are using this voltage signal for polarization purpose of the relay, then at the time of fault, it might happen that the voltage might collapse to such a low value that the relay might not be able to correctly determine the direction, or the relay polarization might not be correct. That's why what is used in a cross polarization is that if you are using the relay for R phase, then the voltage of the other two healthy phases are used for the polarization purpose. Now this I have already explained in the last slide. This is simple impedance characteristic, and this characteristic is a circle with its center as origin in the RX plane. It has a good resistive reach, and as already explained, it has a non-directional characteristic and higher chances of load encroachment. Load encroachment we will discuss in subsequent slides, but or subsequent lectures. But as you have already understood up to this point, load encroachment is basically the encroaching of load inside this operating characteristic, such that the relay will operate without fault in case of higher loading on the transmission lines. Second thing, this characteristic is susceptible to power swings, and we will discuss power swings on the later sessions. Now, second characteristic is self-polarized mode relay. Self-polarized means I have already explained that we are using this voltage of the same phase for the polarization of the relay. Now, this characteristic is again a circle, but it passes through the origin. This because of passing through the origin, this relay is inherently directional. This is less susceptible to power swing, but uh, if there is a fault closer to origin, then this relay might not operate, uh, assuming that the fault is in the reverse direction. Second is offset mode characteristic. It has a reverse reach and usually used for time delayed zones to provide backup for forward and reverse fault. And like already explained in the earlier slides, it ensures secure operation for closure faults. Cross-polarized Moore characteristic I have already explained. For example, a BC phase fault use A phase voltage as the polarization signal, or for A fault use the BC phase voltages for polarization. This ensure proper operation for closure forward and reverse fault with zero fault voltage. It uses the healthy phase voltage to polarize the Moore characteristic. 100% cross-polarized when full magnitude of healthy phase voltage is used. Partially cross-polarized when percentage of healthy phase voltage is used. Three-phase closure faults, I have already explained. If there is a fault which is closer to origin, or if this condition comes, suppose you have taken the shutdown of the line, and now at time of charging of the line, you forget to remove the line earth switch and you are closing the breaker. Now this fault is closer to substation, and this fault is basically inside the substation, and might be outside the substation also if there are some local earthing used by the transmission line maintenance group person. Now, if you are closing the breaker on this closure fault, it might happen that this more type characteristics might detect this relay in the reverse direction, and it will not operate if it is set to operate only in the forward direction. So up to this point, we have understood what are the various types of characteristics. Yes, definitely we have not covered the resistive or fault resistance in greater details. We will discuss this in a separate lecture. What are the effects of pre-fault and post-fault power flow on the distance protection operation? We will discuss what are the effects of pre-fault and post power flow. If the resistance or resistive arc resistance is higher, what are its effects on distance protection? How distance protection takes actions, or how distance protection takes decision in these conditions? What are the impact of in-feed and out-feed? We will discuss in the subsequent slides, because this is a basic session. So now we have understood somewhat basic concepts of the various characteristics. We have understood how the distance protection relay calculates the impedance up to fault points without including the fault resistance. With the inclusion of the fault resistance, how this apparent impedance calculation by the relay changes. And now we will start with the various zones of distance protection. Basically, if you see this diagram, there are two transmission line. One is MN and other is NP, and a relay at RM and RN is used for the protection of transmission line. RM relay is used for the protection of transmission on primary transmission line MN, and similarly the relay at N, that is the relay RN, is used for the primary protection of transmission line NP. But at the same time, this relay RM may provide the backup protection of the line NP up to some extent, and this relay RN may provide the backup protection of the further line. Suppose this line is PQ, then it will provide the backup protection of the adjacent lines. Basically, we have 3 or 4 zones of protections implied in all the utilities, and generally, we use 3 forward zones of protection and 1 reverse zone of protection. These forward zones of protections are basically zone 1, zone 2, zone 3 I designated, and zone 4 or zone 5 are as per various relay manufacturers, they are either using zone 4 or zone 5, but that doesn't mean that this is a different thing. Basically, there are 3 forward zones and 1 reverse looking zone in each and every numerical relay nowadays. Now, zone 1 is basically a primary zone, and this zone itself, if suppose there is a transmission line from MN, our first requirement is that whenever there is any fault on this transmission line MN, then the relay at RM must operate and clear this fault instantaneously or as quickly as possible. That means if you use only a single zone from this bus M to bus N and set that zone to operate instantaneously, so our problem will be solved. That means the relay at M, and it measures the total impedance from M to N. Suppose this impedance is 100 and we set this relay impedance at 100 ohm with time delay 0, and whenever it is measuring the impedance lower than 100, it will operate. That means we are using zone 1 for the complete coverage of transmission line MN. But normally this is not that simple. Actually, the relay at M calculates the value of apparent impedance by the ratio of voltage signal which is available to relay through the measurement provided by CVT or PT and the current measured by CT. Now you know that these two measuring quantity, that is voltage and current, is measured by CVT and CT, and these equipment CT and CVT are not 100% accurate. They will have some error. So that means the impedance measured by this relay, if you are considering even the two factors of current and voltage, then also the ratio will have some error. Now suppose the impedance up to this point is 100 ohm and this relay is measuring this impedance correctly. Even in that case, if there is some error in current and voltage, then it might happen that the impedance measured by this relay for any fault inside this transmission line is not the true representation of the total impedance, because it depends upon the accuracy of CT and CVT, and that accuracy might be either in the forward direction or in the reverse direction. That means if the current is actually in primary terms 1000 ampere, then this relay might measure it at 990 or at 1010. Similarly, the voltage may be measured 400 kV may be measured at 398 or 402, depending upon the accuracy of this CT and CVT. And if these values are this error are in the same direction or in the reverse direction, then the impedance magnitude will keep on changing. This is one factor, the error due to CT and CVT. Another factor is that this relay, the impedance relay or the distance relay used at this bus M is basically nowadays these are numerical relays, and numerical relays, as you know, these are having microprocessor, and these microprocessor basically these are using these digital signals, and these digital signals are obtained from these analog signals using some A to D conversion. Then before that you are using this sampling, quantization and normalization along with these anti-aliasing filters to remove these higher frequency components from your sampled signal. Now when we are converting this analog signal to digital signals, then there are always some chances that those signals measured by the relay in the digital domain is not exactly the same which is in the analog domain, because of the error in the ADC converters. And this error basically depends upon the number of bits of ADC converters. Higher the number of bits, definitely the error will be reduced, quantization error. But if you keep on increasing the number of bits of the analog to digital converters, then definitely the processor you need will also be more and more complex, and that will increase the economic or the cost of the relay. So somewhere we have to limit the number of bits, and the moment we limit the number of bits, the accuracy hampers. Second thing, the sampling that is being employed inside the relay. You know that higher and higher sampling rates will generally provides a better representation or true representation of this signal in the digital domain. But once again, it is the same thing. If you are using higher and higher value of sampling frequency, then your processor needs to be more and more complex. That will increase the cost. So somewhere down the line, the sampling frequency is also limited from 1K to 2K or 3K hertz, depending upon the complexity in the relay, depending upon the manufacturer or the cost that you want to incur. So all these factors contribute to the error inside the relay itself. That means now you have three types of error: error due to CT, error in the CVT measurement, error in the relay processing or relay inaccuracies, and relay measurement error. Another type of error is your line parameters. Actually, the distance relays are set based on the impedance of the transmission lines. Now, this impedance of transmission line is what? This impedance is basically your positive sequence, some of the positive sequence, zero sequence, and negative sequence reactances of transmission lines. As you know, the positive and negative sequence of the transmission line impedance are generally the same, but zero sequence impedance will be different. We will cover that in different lectures if required during the fault analysis session. But right now, if you know, the zero sequence impedance or zero sequence magnitude depends upon the soil conditions or soil resistivity. That means if the zero sequence magnitude at some location A is suppose 1 ohm, that it might happen that at some other location where the soil resistivity is higher, then the zero sequence impedance magnitude might change. So you cannot estimate the correct magnitude of zero sequence parameters. Secondly, the line impedance measurement or the reactance measurement of the line, those are also not the correct measurement. They involve some or other forms of error. That means you have four different types of error in your measurement while employing the resistance protection, and those errors are error due to CT, error due to CVT, error due to relay measuring or relay processing, and finally the line parameter errors. Generally, these errors are considered in the range of plus minus 5%. That means these errors might go in the higher side plus 5% or in the lower side of minus 5%. But suppose all these errors are in the higher sides, then what happens if you set this relay zone 1 to 100% and all these errors are in higher side, then it might happen that this 100 ohm measuring relay which is measuring here, then this relay might calculate this 100 as 120 and it sees that, oh, this fault is at line NP, and then your relay may not operate correctly. That's why zone 1 of the main protection line or zone 1 of the transmission lines are never set to 100%. It is set to 80 to 85%, and generally it is set to 80%. And why 80%? If you see here in the line MN, if you suppose the zone 1 is set to 80% and all your error is contributing plus 5% error, that means suppose the CT error is 5, so 80 plus 5, 85 plus 5 CVT, 90 plus 5 relay, 95 plus 5 the line parameter error. So maximum you can reach up to 100, and that means even if you set the relay at 80%, not due to the four types of error, that relay will reach only to the end bus or the remote end bus. So the chances of incorrect operation or not operation is limited or is reduced. So zone 1. Then the second zone. Now if you set zone 1 only up to 80%, that means what happens? The remaining 20% line remains unprotected. Zone 1 is 80%, remaining 20% of line remains unprotected. That means to cover this 20%, you have to incorporate another zone. That zone is called zone 2, and basically this zone will cover not only this 20%, but 120% of total line length, that is up to 120%. Why up to 120%? Because now if you consider this is 120 and all relays are, all the various type of error are in minus 5 direction, that is 120 is the total, minus 5 CT, that is 115, minus 5 CVT is 110, minus 5 relay, that is 105, and minus 5 line parameter, that means 100. So if you set is 120 and all errors are in minus 5% direction, then also our relay will reach to the remote bus of the line. That means line will be protected completely using two zones, zone 1 and zone 2 only. Then one more zone, that is zone 3, is provided, and it provides the remote backup for line NP or the remote backup for the relay at location N. Suppose this relay at substation N fails to operate for any fault NP in the line NP, then this relay at M must provide a backup, because if there is a fault at any location in line NP, then this fault is also being fed through this line MN. Now if this relay at N fails to operate, then relay at M must operate, obviously after some time delay. So definitely zone 3 is a time delayed protection. It is used for remote backup. As you can see from here also, zone 2 is also time delayed. Why zone 2 is time delayed? Because it's covering not only the 20% of the principal line, but also some portion of the adjacent line length. And if the fault is in this adjacent line, then definitely relay at M should not operate, but only the relay at N should operate. That's why the zone 2 is time delayed. We will discuss this in detail in the next slides. Now this is the basic characteristic. Basically, this three circles are drawn. This is showing zone 1, followed by zone 2 and zone 3. And the diameter of this circle is basically the total impedance that is set up to that point. So zone 1 is 80% of line length or 80% impedance, zone 2 120, and zone 3 the total impedance up to the remote end line. Similarly, we can draw it in the quadrilateral characteristic also. This is zone 1, zone 2 and zone 3 along with their resistive reach coverages. Modern relays offer zone 4 and 5 to reinforce the backup functions also. We will see in the later slides. Now, this is our basic distance zones. If you see here, this is a transmission line AB. At transmission line A, this green line shows the zone 1 setting, which is up to this point, and suppose this is 80% of transmission line. Zone 2 is basically 120% of transmission line, and why it is set 120%, that I have already explained. Because if it is set to 120%, then even if all the errors are in -5 direction, it will reach up to this bus B, and the complete transmission line AB will be protected in any case. Zone 3 is the backup of this remote substation. So zone 3 will cover not only the principal line but also the longest line from the adjacent bus. So zone 3 is the total impedance of the principal line plus the adjacent line length. Similarly, for substation B, zone 1 is 80%, zone 2 120%, and zone 3 is the total line impedance AB plus the longest line from substation A. Now, this is a simple logic which says that if a fault is in zone 1, then the relay must operate instantaneously and it will issue the trip command. But if the fault is in zone 2 or zone 3, then it will operate after some time delay, T2 and T3. What is this time delay, T2? Basically, if you see zone 2, now if a fault which is at this point, that is in the line BC, if this is BC, if a fault is at this point BC, then firstly the relay at station B must operate, and if this relay at station B fails to operate, then only the relay at substation A will operate. That means the minimum operating time for relay at substation A must be the time of operation of relay B plus some coordination time delay. This is very simplest, in very simplest term, but in actual terms this will include not only the time of operation of relay B but the time of operation at relay B plus the LVB operating time at substation B. We will discuss what is LVB while covering the bus bar protection. LVB is basically local backup breaker protection, and then the reset time of the relay at this point followed by some coordination time interval. We will see this in detail in subsequent slides, but the zone 2 time will vary from 350 to 500 milliseconds, and then the zone 3 time is basically when zone 3 comes in picture. Zone 3 will comes into picture only if the relay at substation B fails to operate, and that means the zone 3 time will be more than the zone 2 times, and that means this zone 3 times is generally set in power grid or in Indian utilities from 800 to 1000 millisecond. Now this is in greater details. We have three set of lines: transmission line AB, CD, and then it is something called EF. Now if you see at substation A, zone 1A or zone 1 of line A will cover the 80% of the transmission line AB impedance. That means Z1A will be 80% of the line impedance AB. What will be zone 2? Zone 2 is basically 120% of the total transmission line impedance ZAB, that is 120% of AB. Thirdly, what is zone 3A? Zone 3A, if you see, zone 3A is basically the basically it is used for providing the backup of remote substation. So it will consist of the total impedance ZAB plus ZCD. Now it is then multiplied with 1.2, or it is 120% of ZAB plus ZCD, and this 120% is again because of the same logic. If you are considering only ZAB plus ZCD, then it might happen that in some cases we might not cover the complete entire remote backup because of those four errors discussed already earlier. So if you consider line AB plus CD, and then 120% of those lines. That means we will reach up to this point. And now in this case, if the all errors are even in the -5 direction, then we will reach up to the remote bus of the remote bus. That means we will give complete remote backup of this substation C relay. This is, I have already explained in the previous slide, this is how it is implemented. AB is basically the total line impedance, and now out of this AB, 80% of this AB is suppose Zone 1, so 80% of AB is drawn by, suppose this AB is 100 ohm, so ZAB will be 80 ohm, and now you have drawn a circle with radius 80 ohm passing through origin. That means this is your more characteristics. And now zone 2 will be 120%, so a circle with diameter 120 ohm it is drawn, and zone 3 it will be ZAB plus CD times 120. And if you see here, zone 3 is drawn in both directions. Basically it is zone 3 in some of the relay. Zone 3 consists of two parts, zone 3 forward and zone 3 reverse. So basically here we have three forward zone, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and one reverse zone is zone 4 or zone 3 reverse. Now zone 1, as I have already explained, it provides the fast operation, and this strips circuit breakers without delay as soon as fault within zone 1 is reached. We cannot set zone 1 as 100% of protected lines, or it may overreach into next section. As I have already explained, because of the four errors, and these errors are CT, VT, Z line information, and relay measurement. Now, what happens if you set this line AB zone 1 at 100%? Then, due to those errors, this zone 1 might overreach up to this point. Suppose the fault is at this point, then also because the impedance measured by this relay, because of various types of error, it might see this fault inside this zone 1 and relay might operate incorrectly. So to avoid that situation, zone 1 is set to 80%. Zone 2, I have already explained, it covers the last 20% of the line which is not covered by zone 1. It provides the backup protection for remote bus bar. Secondly, zone 2 is time delayed. And why does zone 2 is time delayed? Suppose there is a fault at this point F, then firstly the relay at H must operate, and if relay at H fails to operate, then only relay at G will operate. That's why the zone 2 is time delayed, and it is its time delay is coordinated with the zone 1 of adjacent line. Now, zone 2 of adjacent lines are normally not time graded with each other. Why? If you see here, this is a line G or GH, any line G, second line H. Now, for relay at G, the zone 1 is Z1G, zone 2 is Z2G. Similarly, for relay at H, zone 1 is zone 1H, and zone 2 is zone 2H. Now, if you see here, the overlap generally occurs in this 20% portion. In this 20% portion, zone 2 of relay at G and zone 1 and zone 2 both of relay at H will overlap. If you provide, or if you coordinate zone 2 of relay at G and zone 2 of relay at H, you will not going to achieve anything. Why? Basically, if there is a fault at F, so what happens? Relay at H will operate, and relay at H will send this signal, tripping signal, to circuit breaker at H. Now, there are two cases. Either the circuit breaker opens or fault clears, or circuit breaker may not operate and fault might not clear. Now, if circuit breaker fails to operate or circuit breaker does not operate, then there are again two cases. One case is that the relay at H operates, but the tripping relays, which is extending the trip command to circuit breakers, fail to operate. Now, if you are using zone 2, then definitely if zone 1 uh, of relay at H operates and breaker does not trips, that means if zone 2 operates at this substation, then also the breaker will not trip because it will be generally followed by the same trip relays. So what happens? This fault will not be cleared by a protection relay at substation H. At this point of time, we are not considering the local breaker backup, but we are considering only the zones of distance zones. So if the protection relays at substation H operates, firstly, zone 1 will operate and it will try to clear the fault, but because of some problem in tripping relay at substation H, this fault will not be cleared. And now if the zone 2 operates, then also fault will not be cleared because generally those uh, tripping are followed by the same trip relays. So fault must be cleared by relay at G. So this is one condition. Second condition, it might happen that the relay at H operates correctly. Trip relay also operated, but circuit breaker fails to trip. Now in this condition also, uh, the condition is that the relay at H operated, trip relay is correct, but circuit breaker fails to operate. Now what happens is that if the relay at substation H is issuing trip command to the circuit breaker, then zone 1 will issue the trip command to the same trip coil. Zone 2, zone 3, every zones will issue the time tripping to the same trip coils. And if breaker fails to operate, that means that trip coils of the circuit breaker is having some problem. Now, the fault will be cleared at substation H only if the breaker is energized using a second set of trip coils by zone 2 protection. But this is not generally done because you cannot complicate this scheme in such a way that you are using one set of trip relays, one set of trip coil for one particular zones of operation, then second set of trip relays, second set of trip coils for second zones of operation. And anyway, you cannot have multiple trip relays and multiple trip coils inside a circuit breakers. You already have only two tripping coils. So generally, if the relay at uh, H substation H operates and it doesn't isolate the fault, then we have to clear that fault only through the zone 2 at substation G. And this is why the zone 2 at substation G is not time graded with zone 2 of substation H. Now, if you are not time grading means the zone 2 of substation H is suppose it is 500 millisecond, zone 2 of substation G is also 500 millisecond. Now, what happens? Zone 1 at H fails. Fails to operate means either zone 1 fails to operate or circuit breaker not operated. Now, there is a race condition between zone 2G and zone 2H. Now, because we have not time graded. So, if you have you want to have a better coordination, one possible thing is that you may coordinate this zone 2H and zone 2G. But the coordination of zone 2G with zone 2H will make the system more and more complex. Why? Because now again in this case, if you keep on coordinating this zone 2 of the upstream line with zone 2 of zone downstream lines, then what happens is that uh, the zone 2 of the uh, relays of at nearer to source will have larger time delays if it consists of more line sections. And then end zone faults on line nearest the infit source point will be cleared very, very slowly. That's why zone 2 is not time delayed or zone 2 is not coordinated with zone 2 of G is not coordinated with zone 2 of H. But then there is one more thing, one more issues in coordination, and that is what happens if your one of the long line is followed by several short lines. What is the impact of long lines followed by several short lines? Here, this is a line G emanating from substation G, and this is a very long line followed by some short lines. Suppose this H, J, emanating from substation H, emanating from substation J, and these are very short lines. Suppose this long line G line, any line 1, 2 between substation G, H, and this line is suppose of 300 kilometers, but the subsequent adjacent lines are only of 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, or 40 kilometers. Now what happens? The zone 1G of this line GH, that is well and good, no issue up to this point, because anyway however long this line is, we already set only 80% of that line impedance for zone 1. Now zone 2 is 120% of this long line, and this 120%, suppose this line is your 300 kilometers, that means this 120% of 300 will be 360 kilometers, and suppose this line HJ is only of 20 or 30 kilometers, that means this 360 is from substation G to not only up to this point, but it might reach up to some points more further away from the second lines or second adjacent bus. Now in this case, what happens? If you look at second bus, that is bus H, it's zone 1. Zone 1, we doesn't have any problem. Its zone 2 is 120%. Again, no issue. Now zone 3 of this line, this zone 3 is this line HJ plus suppose this line, this is anything like JK. So HJ plus JK into 120%. And now suppose this line HJ is 30 kilometers, this line JK is also 30 kilometers. So your zone 3 at substation H will be 30 plus 30 into 1.2, that means something called 72 kilometers. Now this zone 3 at substation H and zone 2 of substation G will have some overlap period or some overlap region. Now if there is a fault on this line J, then there comes a condition in which a fault which is in the line section JK and which might have been cleared by the relay at H, but it is not being cleared by relay at H, but it is being cleared by relay at G because it is in the zone 2 of this relay. And obviously this condition will come only when this relay at J fails to operate. But if that is the condition, then ideally, in ideal condition, what should have happened is that the relay at H must have operated first, and after that only relay at G should have operated. But in this case, because a long line is followed by several short lines, so it might happen that the zone 2 of the longer lines will operate, or zone 2 of the longer line reaches well beyond the zone 2 of the shorter lines, or it will overlap with some portions of the zone 3 of the shorter lines itself. So now to limit this issue, what is generally done is that in all of these conditions, the zone 2, if you use this generalized concept that zone 2 is 120% of principal line, then you cannot eliminate these types of problems. So what generally is done, if there is any situation in which a long line is followed by several short lines, then generally it is done is that the zone 2 of longer line, that is zone 2 at substation G, will be the principal lines plus 50% of the adjacent short lines only. Now if this is substation G, so its zone 2 will be 300, if we are assuming this line as 300, plus 50% of this line HJ, suppose this line is 30 kilometers, so that 50% is 15. So total zone 2 of this line will be 315 times 120 or 120%, 315 kilometers only. And now that 315 in this case uh, is not overreaching or not reaching up to the zone 3 of line H. So in this way we can coordinate zone 2. So this is a complex situation. This is a complex cases. We will discuss as the lecture progresses in the subsequent sessions how the coordination is done in a simple grid, in simple power system network, how the coordination is done in a complex power system network. What happens when there are several long lines followed by a short lines, or what happens if there is a long lines followed by some parallel lines, then again some long lines. So we will consider each and every case in subsequent lectures. Now, zone 3, it is, as we already know, zone 3 is only for the backup of net adjacent line. So it is very simple things. Zone 3 is basically, if you are considering the same case, though, we have three transmission line emanating from three substations, substation G, substation H, and substation K. And the zone 3 at substation G will be the impedance of the transmission line GH plus impedance of the transmission line HK times 1.2. This is your zone 3 in the forward direction. Here one more thing is shown. This is zone 3 of reverse direction. Basically, the zone 3 of reverse direction in some of the relay it is called as zone 4, and we will discuss during the practical sessions of the various numerical relays. Basically, this convention of zone 3 forward and zone 3 reverse is used in Alstom or GE make MyCom relays, and in all other relays like Siemens, Ciprotec, and ABB REL670, the designation are zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and zone 4. And zone 4 there are basically the reverse zone. We will consider this during the practical session, but right now we are limiting ourselves up to this point. So zone 3 is the backup of the longest line from the remote bus. So it will be 120% of the principal line impedance plus the impedance of the adjacent longest line. In the reverse direction again, we will consider only 10 to 25%. Basically, in the reverse direction, what we should have considered, if you see here, then up to this point, what we have considered is for zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, everything is that. The error is from this point. But error while considering from the right to left, but there might be the chance that there are some cases in which the fault is in the, suppose in the bus bar at substation G, but the relay at substation G, due to the error in measurement, sees this fault in the forward directions and this relay might operate. Now, to avoid all these conditions, some reverse looking zones are provided. Those reverse looking zones, one thing is for that. Another thing, if there is a fault which is very closer to substation, you must provide some margin, and that reverse zone, which is basically it is only 20%. And why 20%? Because suppose 20% comes out to anything like this, the easier thing will be at substation H. Suppose at substation H, the zone 4 in the reverse direction is up to this point. Now, why we consider up to this point is that in case of any fault in the bus bar, generally the bus bar protection will operate and it will clear the fault. But if the bus bar protection fails to operate, then your relay at H must operate to clear this fault. But for relay at H to operate, if you set this relay at H to a very low value, then due to that various type of errors, uh, it may be possible that this reverse zone will not come inside this relay at H during the various types of error. So generally we set at 20%, and now if all these error are in minus direction, so it will again comes down to 20 minus 20, that is up to this bus. We will discuss it in details in the subsequent lectures. Now this is ideal situations of time delay. Basically, zone 1, it is an instantaneous protection, and as you know in power system, nothing is instantaneous. Instantaneous is generally means no intentional time delay. That means zone 1 protection will operate instantaneously. That it means it will operate from approximately 20 to 25 milliseconds. Now, what is zone 2? The ideal zone 2 timing will be, firstly, what will be the zone 2 time? The first thing, that the zone 1 at that down substation, that means if you are considering this case GHK, so the time of operation of zone 2 relay at substation G, how it will be calculated? Firstly, the time of operation of zone 1 relay at this substation. Now, suppose this time of operation at relay at H is 20 to 30 millisecond, and we are considering it at 35 millisecond. So, firstly, that relay at substation H will operate, and it will operate in 30 to 35 milliseconds. After operation of relay H, the circuit breakers at H will open. So if you consider, generally the circuit breaker operating time is 20 to 30 milliseconds. So firstly the relay will operate. After this, the circuit breaker will trip. So these two times, cumulative time will be somewhere in the range of 70 to 80 milliseconds. Next thing will be the zone 2 reset time of this substation. Now, what happens? Firstly, the zone 1 operated. After the operation of zone 1, the circuit breaker will trip. If circuit breaker fails to trip, then the next thing comes is your breaker failure or local substation or local breaker failure protection. We will discuss in subsequent lectures, but generally its time delay is 200 milliseconds. So 30 milliseconds or 20 milliseconds for zone 1 operation, 20 to 30 milliseconds for breaker opening at this point, plus 200 milliseconds of LVB times. That means 200 plus 50 to 60. That means if you are assuming it is suppose 60 milliseconds, so 260 milliseconds is the minimum time of operation of clearance of fault from substation H if zone 1 fails to operate and circuit breaker also fails to operate. Then only after 260 milliseconds this relay at G should operate. So now if you set this relay at G at exactly 260 milliseconds, that means there might be a condition, or there might have a race around condition in which the relay at G may operate earlier than the operation of breaker failure protection at this substation. So you must provide some coordination time intervals. You must provide some time delay between these two operating relays. So that time interval will be suppose 30 or 40 millisecond. If you consider as 40, so this up to this point we have calculated 260 plus 40. That means the minimum operating time for the relay at G should be 300 millisecond. But remember, we are missing one important point here. That important point is when initially there is a fault in this line, at that time your relay at H will start, and at the same time relay at G will also start. If this relay at G, both relay starts at same time, and if the relay at H operates and clears the fault, then relay at G must reset. That means there are always some time given for resetting of protection at the bus G. What is this reset time? Generally, what is the meaning of this reset time? If you know from this disk type relay, this visualization is very easy. If you know that once the fault is incepted and after the occurrence of fault, the relay at G will start, this disk will start rotating like this, and immediately after the clearance of fault from bus relay at H, this disk will operate after some time delay, and this stopping of disk after some time delay is called the reset time. Basically, this time is again given in this numerical relay. Also, this reset time feature comes because there you are calculating samples after samples, and then on the basis of large samples, the relay is calculating if there is a fault or no faults. And once the relay has started and the next zone has cleared, or next relay at adjacent bus has cleared the fault, then also this will reset only after the next sample of these faults or next sample value. So this reset time you generally provides as 30 to 40 milliseconds. So till this point we have calculated total time at 260 plus 40, that is 300, and now this reset time of 50. So zone 2 operating time will be ideally 350 milliseconds. This is older slides mentioned 275, so 350 milliseconds is for zone 2. By the same way, zone 3 is calculated, and zone 3, if you now calculate zone 3. So firstly zone 2 will operate. So zone 2 operating time is 350 millisecond plus then same thing, circuit breaker opening time of suppose 30-40 milliseconds. That means if you are considering only the 50 milliseconds, so 350 plus 50 is 400 plus some reset time of 50 milliseconds, that is 450, and plus some coordination time of 50 milliseconds. So ideally the minimum possible zone 3 time should be 500 milliseconds, but in the power system network, the zone 3 time is set it from 800 to 1.5 seconds and 800 milliseconds to 1.5 seconds. And how this is set, we will see in the subsequent lecture during relay setting calculations and the practical demonstrations. So this completes the first session on distance protection. In this session, we have covered the limitations of overcurrent protection, why overcurrent protection are limited in a complex grid. The overcurrent protections, its limitations due to the changing grid conditions, changing source impedance values. Then we have discussed the various types of characteristics of distance protections, followed by the distance zones, how the coordination is done, the impact of fault resistance, but again we have discussed it in very little detail. We will cover this fault impedance, fault resistance, and then the pre-fault, post-fault power flow impact, along with the in-feed and out-feed effect in the subsequent lectures. We will also cover the power swing, load encroachment, and other ancillary functions in the subsequent lectures. But in the next session, we will start from these zones. We have till now we have completed up to zone 3, and one important thing that we have understand is that the transmission line, that is the principal transmission line, is protected by two zones, basically zone 1 and zone 2. Zone 1 is only covering 80% of the transmission line, so remaining 20% of transmission line is protected by some delayed timing. So in the subsequent or in the next lecture itself, we will discuss how we can reduce or how we can eliminate the time delay of zone that 20% area, how we can eliminate that time delay. That is called the carrier aided schemes or the communication assisted distance protection schemes. So we will discuss in this second session. Thank you.